Hey everybody, Leah Klett here with the Christian Post, and my guest today is actor and filmmaker Emilio Estevez, and we are discussing the re-release of his beautiful film, The Way. What a beautiful film this was. I'd never seen it before, so
Oh,
I got to watch it for the first time.
mm.
Was just struck by the power and the deep spirituality of the story. And I'm so curious about how your own relationship with your father, who of course is also in the film, and your
Mm.
relationship with your own children really informed your approach to this film.
Well, initially, my son was working as my father's assistant in 2003, and they were working on The West Wing at the time, and they had a summer off that's called a hiatus, where they've got like 6 weeks in between season I don't know, 4 and 5. And my father had always wanted to go and check out the Camino de Santiago because his father was born about 50, 60 miles away from Santiago de Compostela in a town called Vigo, which is right on the Portuguese Spanish border. So he wanted to go, and they had organized a trip to celebrate my grandmother's, his mom's 100th year birth. And there was a bunch of uncles that had gone along. My son went along because he was his assistant. And after they finished their moment of, a reunion in Spain, or I'm sorry, in Ireland, my dad said, "Well, who wants to come with me to Spain?" And my son was the only one to raise his hand. Off they go. But because now time was short, they didn't have the full 40 days to walk the Camino. So they rented a car and they drove along the Camino and they make little stops along the way and take photos and places of interest. And they stopped in a town called Burgos, which is, as if you're looking at the map, from Madrid, it's about 2 hours north of Madrid. And they stayed in an albergue, and this young woman walks in, and she was basically the innkeeper's daughter. My son takes a look at her, falls in love, decides he's going to move to Spain, and ended up living there for 9 years.
Wow.
So got married. In fact, they got married on the summer that we started actively preparing to shoot the way. So I had to figure out how to spend time with my son. And it was going over to Spain. And I think, well, if I'm going to spend a lot more time with them, I better figure out how to work there. So I began to write the script, and the script was really developed through conversations that I had with my dad, who did want to make a movie in Spain, but didn't had no idea about what that movie would be. So I said, well, didn't I kind of lose my son on the Camino? I said, obviously not as dark as where I think I want to take this story. But he said, yeah. And I said, why don't we start with that? So the script began to develop. So in many ways, it was inspired by my son, his grandson, starring my dad, and I dedicate the movie to my grandfather Francisco at the end of the film. So it's generational. It pays homage to the country where where we derive our roots from, most of our roots anyway. And then now I have a granddaughter. My granddaughter Alma is going to turn 4 next month, and she was the second miracle that happened along our Camino, our family Camino.
Prayer is such a theme in this film. Tom struggles to connect with God after losing his son, questions, the purpose of life. Why was it important to really highlight the power of prayer in this movie?
Well, what better way to contemplate your spiritual life than going on pilgrimage?
Yeah.
And in Tom's case, he's a lapsed Catholic. He goes to mass on Easter and Christmas. He's not a religious guy. The priest that he meets along the way gives him the rosary. Okay, this is a token, and he doesn't really understand the significance of it in that moment. He's a guy that was never willing to meet his son halfway. They were at odds in terms of how they saw life and how they wanted to live their lives. His character is obviously the guy from the country club, the guy who lives a very kind of isolated lifestyle. In the very early part of the movie, we see he and his son sort of at odds. He
Mhm.
won't meet him halfway, as I said. It takes the son's passing. It takes the father not only traveling to Spain, but then making the journey, which he now has to make. He has to meet his son all the way. There's no half. He has to make the entire journey to not only figure out who his son was and who he is, but who Tom's character, who Martin's character is by the end. He becomes a full, mature, transformed human being as a result of pilgrimage, as a result of connecting to his faith and finding his own personal spiritual center.
Mhm. Well, and this movie also really highlights the healing role that spirituality and faith can play in our lives, especially when so many of us have experienced loss over the last 3 years
Oh,
due to COVID.
yeah, yeah, indeed, indeed, and that is, we've lost over 1 million Americans,
Yeah.
and I don't think we have properly taken the time to grieve. And
Hmm.
I think the film, there's a lot of humor in the movie, so I don't want people to think it's just dark and painful movie to watch. There's a ton of humor in it, but it is about loss. It is about grief. It is about healing,
Hmm.
and but that's life. We're
Definitely.
all going to experience loss. We're all going, and we hope that we are going to heal and come out of it on the other side and be whole.
Hmm.
We're all imperfect. We're all broken. We're all broken souls. And that is, that is our fundamental connection to each other. We recognize the brokenness in each other, and that's called humanity, and that is called life. And so I think that this film really celebrates that. It celebrates our humanity. It celebrates our brokenness because by the end and this is not a spoiler alert, for those who've seen the movie, our characters reach the end, and they're okay being broken. They're okay being imperfect.
Yeah.
And God loves us in our imperfection and
Yeah.
probably loves us more in our imperfection, right? And so we spend so much time covering up, whether it's it's pretense, changing the way you look, changing your putting on these airs, putting on. We think, well, if I buy that suit, my life's going to turn. If I have this surgery done, my life is going to improve. And how often do we tend to lean into those things? And at the end of the day, they haven't made us any better. They haven't made us any more joyful. So how do we get to the point where we just accept ourselves for who we are in the moment?
I mean, you're preaching to me right now. That is powerful. That's powerful stuff right there.
Well, and I think it's true. I mean, it's true for me. Again, I know I'm imperfect. I wake up every day knowing that, and I know that I'm never going to be perfect. But I know I can always endeavor to be a better version of myself through my work, through my relationships, through how I walk this life. I always try to make sure that I'm not only talking the talk, but I'm walking it too.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of work. It's a
It
lot of work.
absolutely is. Yes. Emilio, this movie came out, many years ago. Over the years, what are some of the most heartwarming or compelling or life-changing stories you've heard from people who have seen this movie?
Um, I would say that, and this started early days when the feedback would people would say, "I can do that.
Mm.
I can go to Spain. This place exists. I can go. I can walk. I can go on pilgrimage." And then they would, and the feedback would be, the movie changed my life because I never would have known about the pilgrimage, and B, I never would have known that I could do that.
Mhm.
And up until, while we're on this, during this interview, there's feedback coming in our social media saying, "Thank you for making this movie. Thank
Mhm.
you. This movie changed my life, quite literally." And somebody call it the Holy Grail. It's just like, okay, thank you. I mean, obviously, that is not something that we set out to make. When we were making a very human story, and I think that so often in Hollywood, we, as an industry, get further and further away from the earth
Yeah.
and from making stories about people. We want to make movies in outer space. We want to make movies And I was talking earlier today about, these billionaires who want to go to Mars, and spend billions and billions of dollars. We have so many problems on this planet that we need to solve before we start taking and exporting them to other worlds. We don't even understand how the brain works. So,
Mhm.
how about the next frontier? Not outer space, but inner space, in our hearts, in our what makes human beings tick.
Mm.
And why do we treat each other the way we do, and why is there so much violence? Why is there so much sadness and unrest? And that all lies right here in this computer that's sitting on the top of my shoulders.
Mhm.
So, and yours, and so on and on and on. But we still don't understand that. But we want to go to Mars. Please,
Yeah.
let's let's figure some fundamental things out about who we are. And as a filmmaker and as a human being, that's my interest. That's where I lean into.
Mhm. And as a father and a grandfather.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. And I want to make human stories about people, and because that people fascinate me.
Mhm.
We're such interesting creatures, aren't we? We're just like, wow, you're extraordinary. You're amazing. What is your story? My dad is great in that. The first thing he does when he meets you, he says, "Where are you from?"
Mm.
And he leans into that. He wants to know where somebody's from. He wants to know their background. He's curious. And I think that the moment we stop being curious, the moment we stop asking the question, the moment we stop being interested in how other people live, well, then we're kind of in trouble,
Yeah.
because then we're in our own self-imposed isolation, and it has nothing to do with COVID.
Yep. That's exactly right. Emilio, are we going to see more of this really beautiful, positive content from you in the future?
Well, I hope so. I mean, certainly that's the plan. I've got a sequel for the way up my sleeve. I've been working on the script on and off for a long time, and this year, and I really think it's been prompted by the fact that the film is coming back. My dad turns 83 this year. He's still got great constitution. He's still ready to go and wants to do it. But I think that part two could really lean into what you're talking about, movies that are positive, that are about human beings, that are about the journey, that are about the spiritual life. And one of the things that his evolution is something that's always been fascinating. Tom's evolution through the film, but in the sequel, he tells the Irish writer, he says, "I have something this time that I didn't have before when you first met me, Jack." And Jack says, "What's that?" He says, "Faith. I have faith now." And
Mm.
so but there's other things going on in his life that actually threaten the foundation of that. So he's found himself, and yet there is this next journey is going to be a difficult one for him as well.
Well, I'm excited to see it. And thank you so much for using your platform and your voice for good. It's just so needed right now.
Thank you. You know what? That's not a heavy lift for me. That's how I'm wired, and so I really feel like that's my mission, and that's my Camino and my pilgrimage that I'm walking as an artist. So thank you. Thanks for taking the time.